Hi, welcome to another episode of Submersed in Science. My name's Jamie Steele and I'm your host. And today we're in Shamcook, New Brunswick at what used to be the Atlantic Salmon Interpretive Center and which will be soon the Wild Salmon Nature Center. It's going through a renaming process here. And I'm here today with Johnathan Carr, who's the Executive Director of Research here at the center. And we're going to talk a little bit about the research activities that the Atlantic Salmon Federation is involved in presently. But first a little bit, this is a wonderful center. I know it as an interpretive center, an education center. Salmon Federation plays and has played a significant role in educating the public and youth about Atlantic salmon, right?
Yes, we really try to educate the kids coming up to the schools and the general community about salmon, the importance of Atlantic salmon. It's a culture icon. Actually, salmon appears on New Brunswick flag, the province of New Brunswick, and so not only a cultural icon, but economic value of Atlantic salmon is really important to the overall province of New Brunswick as well. So we try to promote Atlantic salmon, the wild Atlantic salmon, as much as possible.
Right. And Shamcook here, it's been a center for both research and education for a long time.
A number of years, since the early 70s actually. So actually when the ASF, Atlantic Salmon Federation, first started here back in the early 70s, we established a salmon genetics research program where we had a large hatchery which was the setup for actually the startup of what is known now as the commercial aquaculture industry.
Right. Actually, just a little while ago, I was walking and met Jerry Friars, who was instrumental in the development of that program.
Yeah, he was one of the lead researchers here during the day.
Yeah, cool. So education, we know, I know that in the past the Federation had a Fish Friends program through the schools in all Atlantic provinces. That's finished now, but continuing to do education work through the Wild Atlantic Nature Center here, soon to be Wild Atlantic Nature Center here. So people can come and visit, take part, and look at interpretive displays that you have here on site, right?
Yeah, and I guess first off with the Fish Friends program, that program is still ongoing. ASF is not directly involved with that anymore, but we've handed that off to some of our affiliate groups and local partners. For instance, here in Charlotte County, I think the Eastern Charlotte Waterways are now carrying out that program. So cool. We still have that in a number of local schools, and it's been a really great educational tool for kids, I think late elementary, early middle school, looking at the life cycle of Atlantic salmon, the importance of Atlantic salmon, and just the overall features
with it's
wild
a
Atlantic salmon.
Cool program. I was actually involved in the startup of that way back in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever. Anyway. But more to the point, your role here at the Federation as a researcher, a director of research activities that the Federation does. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days?
Yeah, well, our research department's been around since about 1996, and what we want to base our policy and any advocacy programs on is facts, so science-based programs. So anything that we go out and promote and say in the public, it's based on research, science-based research. So we have a number of programs underway in our research department. And really, there's two flagship programs that we've been involved with over the past number of years. One is looking at low marine survival of Atlantic salmon, because the Atlantic salmon populations, they've drastically declined since around the 1980s, mid-1980s in this region. And what we're finding is in several rivers there still remains relatively good juvenile populations, but there's just the fish aren't coming back to the river systems. So it points to a problem in the ocean. So what we've been wanting to do is follow that problem in the ocean. Where exactly are the fish dying? When are they dying? And what actually is causing the deaths of the fish? And I can go into a little bit more of that program a bit later if you wish, or
now, whatever.
Okay, yeah. So basically on that program, we started back in 2003. Looking at some rivers draining into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And specifically, we've been looking at the Miramichi River, the Restigouche River, and the Grand Cascapedia River in Quebec. The reason we focused on those rivers is because the juvenile populations still remain quite healthy in those systems, and we still have a pretty good number of adults coming back to those rivers. Now, if we come back down here to the inner bay, outer bay of Fundy, the wild salmon populations just have not recovered since the mid to late 1980s.
Right.
So there's just not enough fish to do research on to find out what's happening in the ocean. So what we've been doing in those rivers is we've been tracking the fish. We've been putting acoustic tags, or called pingers, into the fish.
Of course. I mean, it's a big ocean.
It's a big ocean, so these
you can't
pingers,
follow them.
These pingers actually go into salmon smolt, and salmon smolt migrate out into the ocean during the spring of the year over about a 4-week period. And so they transition from the par stage to the smolt stage.
Right.
So just to back up a little bit, your wild adult Atlantic salmon spawn usually late October, early November, lay their eggs. Juveniles hatch the following spring, and those juveniles will stay in the river for anywhere from 2 to 4 years before they reach a size of about 15 centimeters or 6 inches. They migrate to the ocean. That's where they undergo most of their growth. So they grow from about this size to about this size over a period of a year and a half. So in the spring, when these fish are going out to the ocean, we catch them in traps on the way out, and we insert these pingers into the fish. And these pingers actually send an electronic signal through the water system so that we can actually identify individual fish. So for instance, we could put a tag in a fish and say, okay, we can track Jamie or John, individual fish past certain zones.
Wow, cool.
And how we do this is we have receivers which we position out through the freshwater and estuary and out into the ocean as far as we can. So as these fish pass by these receivers, that tag ID is registered right onto the receiver, right down to the second that fish passes by the receiver units.
Wow.
So what we've been doing is we've been putting curtains of receivers across head of tides so that we can establish how many fish are surviving through the freshwater. And then we'll put a curtain of receivers around estuaries or bays like the Miramichi Bay or Chaleur Bay so we can understand how many are surviving out through the estuaries. And right now we actually have the Gulf of St. Lawrence wired. So between Newfoundland and Labrador and through the Cabot Strait, we have that wired so we know exactly how many fish are surviving going out through the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And our objective actually is to eventually follow these fish all the way to Greenland.
Wow.
Because that's where most of their feeding takes place. So what we're finding along the way is where exactly are these fish dying and what possibly could be eating the fish. Okay?
So are these receivers then floating? Are they buoyed? Or are they
so there's
below the
strategic.
surface?
Yeah, there's strategic ways that we put the receivers in. In most areas, they're positioned about 10 meters below the surface. So we have a buoy on the surface. We have a rope going down to the bottom with an anchor, and these are tied to a rope about 20 meters below the surface.
Right.
Because they're smolts and salmon in general will swim within your top 3 meters of the water column. Okay.
Wow.
So that's one of the interesting programs we're working on right now with smolts.
Any results back yet?
Yeah, what we're finding, we've been doing this for about 10 years now, so we're finding that the survival is quite high through the freshwater. We're looking at between 80 and 90% of the fish are surviving out through the freshwater. But when the fish get into the estuaries or the bay zone, that's where we say they're heavily taxed. We're losing a lot of fish in those areas. The survival drops to between 30 and 50% in those areas. So that's one area that we want to really start zooming in on to find out what exactly is causing the deaths in that particular zone.
Right.
And this isn't only in the Gulf of St. Lawrence region, but we have colleagues down in the state of Maine who are tracking fish out of the Penobscot River system, and they're finding the same thing. High mortality is occurring in the Penobscot Bay area, so it's not just specific to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, but it could be happening everywhere. So.
Wow. Interesting.
Okay.
So, what else have we got?
Well,
happening?
another one is we're actually putting tags into kelts as well. So when the salmon go up and spawn in the river in October, a lot of the adults will stay in the river over the winter months and go back out into the ocean the following spring to recondition and then come back again to spawn. Atlantic salmon, unlike Pacifics, will spawn many times.
Yeah.
So adults, we can actually put a larger tag in the adult salmon. Now with the smolt tags I showed you, they only last about 6 months because the battery's quite small. These tags that we put in the adults can last 3 to 5 years. So we can get a lot more information out of the adults. And again, we put the receivers in certain spots. With the adults, we're finding high survival out through the freshwater and the bay. A lot of the adults are actually dying in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So we're trying to find out what's going on there.
So another step.
So another step, and actually one more step with the adults is where they're larger salmon. These fish are anywhere between 65 to up to 100 centimeters in length, so they could be looking at between 2.5 to 6 kilogram size. We're actually putting satellite pop-up tags on these fish. Now, I don't know if any of your viewers have been following information on Lydia, the great white shark that was tagged down in the Carolinas.
Okay.
It's found its way up into the Newfoundland region. This is the same type of tag that we put on the kelts. So this tag actually provides temperature and depth data, and it also collects geopositioning data, so it actually keeps track of sunrise and sunset times, so that basically going back to our sonic tags, we only know where the fish pass certain areas. With this tag, we can actually follow the fish through different areas. And when this tag pops off the animal, it sends this information directly to a satellite receiver, and we receive exactly where this fish went. So with this tag, it's another step up to find out exactly where the fish are going and exactly where they might be dying, and besides that, what could be eating the fish. For instance, 2 years ago, one of our fish that we had tracked, the tag data came back, and we were looking at the water depth, which was about 5 to 10 meters below the surface, which was normal for salmon, and then it went right down to the bottom of the ocean for a period of 7 days, and then it came back up again. And at the same time, the ocean temperature was around 12 degrees Celsius, and the temperature went up to about 25 degrees Celsius in the ocean for a period of a week. So we actually looked at the data a bit closer and figured out that the fish was eaten by a porbeagle shark. So this tag actually, and the salmon went through a porbeagle shark
into the fish,
and back out again. So we're actually getting some really interesting data on what's happening to the salmon in the ocean.
Yeah, cool. So this isn't too big to hinder movement at all?
No, so we've actually tagged some of our adults with these tags, and as well as the sonic tags, compared movements, and there's no difference with the movement pattern, so that doesn't appear to hinder the fish movements at all. And a lot of colleagues over in Norway have been tagging the fish with pop-up tags for about 4 or 5 years now, and they found no problems with fish behavior.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's it's great to see how technology can be applied to research. And I bet you guys could probably even set up a public site where anybody could log in. You could have a couple of fish identified, and people could follow individual fish.
We certainly could for these pop-up tags, and as well as the smoke tags. There's new receivers coming out now. The company that we deal with in Nova Scotia, actually it's a local homegrown company, Vemco. We started working with this tracking company back in the early 1990s, and at that time they just had 2 or 3 employees working out of a basement. Now they have over 100 employees. They're supplying thousands of tags around the world. So I mean, they've really made a lot of progress over recent years. And one of the newest pieces of technology they've come out with is a receiver that you can actually hook into a cable, so that you can actually get movement information in real time. So if a fish passes by a receiver, it actually logs right into your office. You can say, hey, that fish actually passed by there 10 minutes ago. So there is some interactive information that we can garner from this as well now too, which helps keep the public informed what's going on, helps support programs as well, because we actually have an Adopt a Smoke program where the public can actually purchase a smoke tag for $500, and then we send progress on that tag, when it was tagged, how big the fish was, if it survived all the way through its journey or not. So we provide a lot of information on that fish.
Cool.
And so the science is really interesting, it's really fun, but what does it mean? What we want to do is actually look at how can we use the science to develop management and policy steps to better protect and conserve Atlantic salmon. So through our tracking programs, what we want to do is find out where the high mortality areas are. Can we offer any protection to the salmon in those areas? What is causing mortality in certain areas? What can we do to mitigate against that, to better protect our fish species, so that we can have them for generations to come?
Yeah, cool. And not only tagging programs, but you guys are also involved in the aquaculture industry too, right?
Yeah.
In domestic farm fish.
Yeah, one of our other keynote programs is looking at aquaculture issues. And as I mentioned earlier, the hatchery, which is on the other side of the stream here, was instrumental in getting the local industry running back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And at that time, what we wanted to do was take pressure off the wild stocks, remove the commercial fisheries at the mouths of the rivers and stuff, and that worked fabulously. We did reduce the pressure on wild stocks. Things were going around fine, until we started doing some research in the early 1990s and found out that a lot of the fish from the net pens are actually escaping, finding their way into river systems. And through our research, not only our research, but other folks in other areas around the world have found out that once escaped salmon enter freshwater rivers, there can be some negative consequences, not only for genetic pollution, but possibly disease and parasites as well. So we've got a river nearby in St. George, the Macadavic River, that we've been monitoring since 1992. And in that river, we can check every single salmon entering fresh water from the ocean at the head of tide fish ladder. I'm sure many of your viewers have been at the St. George Dam or the St. George Gorge. So at that system, we've been following escapees and wild fish for over 20 years now. And what we're finding is the escaped farm salmon are outnumbering wild fish 10 to 1 in many cases. We're well over 90% of the fish coming into the system are aquaculture escapees. What we're doing is preventing those escapees into the Macadavic River because we found that the genetic pollution is not good for the wild stocks. In fact, the wild stock in the Macadavic probably is no longer now, based on DNA analysis that we've looked at over the past number of years. So what we're doing is trying to work with industry to find ways to keep the fish in net pens, because the industry, they don't want to lose fish. We don't want to see fish in the rivers either. So what can we do to try and prevent or at least minimize fish from getting out of the net pen? So that's one of the programs we're working on, is to try and prevent that. And so on that note, we're actually looking at alternatives to net pen industry. We want to see aquaculture work. We need aquaculture for the future, not only in this community. There's a lot of jobs in this community for that, so we support aquaculture, but we want it done in a more sustainable fashion. So there's ways to improve containment measures within the industry, and there's also other options we're exploring too. Can we grow fish on land? And we believe that land-based aquaculture is a technology that's really improved dramatically over the last 10 years, and we've been doing some research on that as an alternative to net pens, or in conjunction with net pen technology.
So moving fish from open cages in coastal,
growing them strictly on land,
into enclosed
facilities. That way, there's no chance for escapees whatsoever. All of your pollution is contained. No waste right now. All the waste from the net pens go directly into the bottom of the ocean floor. With closed containment, you actually have control over your waste. And the projects that we've been working with, up to 99% of your waste can be reclaimed, and you can actually sell some of the waste for fertilizer. There's one company growing yellow perch in the Midwest right now. 25% of their sales is from the fertilizer from the waste product.
Wow. Huh. And I guess you're leading up to a major conference happening here shortly.
Yeah, we're having a land-based closed containment conference here at our facility next week, which will be the last week of April. And it's an international conference. We're having several researchers from around the world coming in to present on the latest technological advances with land-based closed containment. We're having folks coming in talking about marketing strategies. We're having entrepreneurs coming in talking about programs, commercial-based programs that they have up and running, to give us updates on where they stand. And we'll also be talking about additional research needs. There are still some research needs to further develop this industry, but we've been looking at land-based closed containment for about 3 years now, and it's the improvements have been spectacular over the last 3 years.
Way of the future, possibly.
Yeah, we believe so.
Yeah, great. Well, John, thanks very much for spending a little bit of time with me and talking about the Salmon Federation and the work that it's doing. I think, when I think about it, nothing's more constant than change here. I mean, you're integrating new technology into the research you're doing. You're changing the name of the Interpretive Center here to the Wild Atlantic Nature Center. You're possibly helping to change the way aquaculture is being done in the region. All positive.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cheers. So we're back at the Salmon Federation, continuing our episode for Submersed in Science, and just happened to have been able to snag Steve Summerfelt, who's the research director?
The director of aquaculture research at the Conservation Fund's Freshwater Institute.
Right, so he's all the way up here from West Virginia, and part of a conference on closed containment systems for aquaculture. And I understand that the Conservation Fund has developed a partnership with the Atlantic Salmon Federation to look at this whole idea of closed containment. Not something that's new. I understand you've been working on it for 20 years or more.
Yeah,
right?
over 2 decades.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the project and what you're hoping to do?
Well, we've been experts at developing technology to raise fish, increase farm fish production in systems that hardly use any water and practically eliminate water pollution. And they also keep the diseases out so the fish stay healthy. And we've been using the systems with rainbow trout mostly.
Right.
And about 5 years ago, we started raising Atlantic salmon. And we can raise Atlantic salmon in fresh water 70 miles from the ocean to 4 or 5 kilos in just about 2 years from hatch. And fortunately, we started working with the Atlantic Salmon Federation because the Atlantic Salmon Federation wants to see farm salmon production on land increase. And really nobody was doing it 3 years ago, all the way to food size. So for the last 5 years, we've raised 4, and now we're on our 5th grow-out trial that shows Atlantic salmon can consistently be raised in good health, good welfare, to harvest size in land-based closed containment systems. And even without the use of antibiotics, we use no pesticides, no vaccines, because the containment system keeps the diseases out. They're in an environment where there are no diseases for fish, other than opportunistic pathogens like fungus. So we have very high survival, very low mortality. None of the fish escape. We have excellent feed conversion. That means it takes about 1 ton of fish feed to produce 1 ton of fish. And it gives the fish the ideal conditions for growth. Produces a very healthy, tasty, high omega-3 product.
So these closed containment systems on land, growing salmon out to full size. Here they're in salt water in cages. So in these systems, are they salt water once they're?
Well, the Atlantic salmon will do very well in fresh water.
Okay.
We found that it's still optimum, just like the salmon net pen producers. They raise the fish on land at first, and they give them a short winter of photo period, short day length. We do the same thing with the fish, and then they grow faster for the second year in fresh water. So the water salinity is not critical for their growth and their health. And they actually, I think they taste outstanding when they come out of these systems. They have a very mild, rich, buttery, rich, sweet flavor.
Oh, great. Well, it'd be great to try some of that. Are you working with other fish as well? You said rainbow trout, salmon.
Rainbow trout are an excellent species to raise, as well as Arctic char. Coho salmon, Atlantic salmon, yellow perch, walleye. We've raised them all. They do very well.
Oh, great. So what are your hopes for this partnership with the Federation?
Well, the largest thing we're getting is a method to communicate with lots of stakeholders. Okay. There's a lot of fish farmers interested in this. There's a lot of concerned environmental groups interested in this. So it's really sharing information and overcoming myths where people would feel that this was not possible or didn't understand what was happening. They can learn and answer their questions and share information. It's mostly information sharing. If you can come back tomorrow, there are 4 commercial farmers telling their story of how they've succeeded or what challenges they've faced raising salmon and trout and other fish to food size.
And where are these folks from?
One of them's from British Columbia,
okay.
Port McNeil, the Namgis First Nation. Another one's from Nova Scotia, Sustainable Blue. Another one is Bell Aquaculture in Indiana. They're raising rainbow trout, yellow perch, and coho salmon all in one facility.
Oh, wow. So there are some good, already some good examples of positive stuff happening.
Very good examples, but we're right on the edge of where I think this industry is going to grow very fast.
Right.
Where we've shown it's technically and biologically feasible. The key is now to have industry prove it's economically viable. When we look at it and do an economic cost evaluation at 3,000 tons per year, it looks very cost effective, as our production costs appear to be about the same as a net pen in Norway would be. Yet we don't have the transportation costs from Norway to the United States.
Right.
We can raise it right in the market area.
Right. Oh, great. So you're feeling so far that the events of the workshop here are productive?
It's an excellent venue. We have almost half of the people here are probably from industry.
Right.
Mostly fish farmers, some suppliers, a lot of veterinarians here, all communicating on what works and what is a challenge. What do we have to overcome? What do we have to do to make sure that this works? And sharing information so everyone else can benefit from it.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks a lot, Steve, for
Thank
sharing
you very much.
a little bit of what you're doing and what the Salmon Federation is doing with you to help move this industry forward.
Well, if you're ever near West Virginia, Washington, D.C., please visit us.
Right on.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Submersed in Science here at the Atlantic Salmon Federation in Shamcook, New Brunswick. We hope you'll join us again soon.